Hello, and thank you for joining us. This is the Screenwriters Masterclass for the Galway Film Fleadh 2021. My name is Mary Kate O'Flanagan, and I'm delighted that we're doing this even in lockdown, and very, very happy to welcome our guest this year. This is Mark Fergus, an American screenwriter, but son of two Irish immigrants. So I'm no doubt very proud parents. So Mark is the screenwriter and producer of the television show The Expanse, and also screenwriter of some people's favorite film of all time, Children of Men, Iron Man, back when I loved Marvel movies, The First Snow, The Last Vermeer, Cowboys and Aliens, many interesting and diverse films. So it's really fantastic to have you. And thank you so much, Mark. It's very generous of you to come and share your time and your wisdom with us.
Thank you for having me. Very delighted.
Yeah. So, Mark, like one of the things that we always want to know is like, how did you get your start? Because I think a lot of the people watching are still like they're writing, but they're finding it difficult to make connections. Now, obviously, the landscape in America is different, but
Yeah.
everybody has a different story about that. So, would you tell us yours?
Yeah. I mean, my journey into the business was really I think fear based, I would say, because growing up, learning about the industry from New York and having no connections to Los Angeles or the business. I think we went into it with a lot of practical advice from my dad, which was to make sure you have a job, make sure you can pay your bills, make sure you. So I went to business school at Boston University. I studied something that I thought was useful and would be able to get me a job, because the writing thing and the whole just the whole business seemed like a mythological thing out west, and there was no internet, there was no real connection to it. So I went into it just studying it and doing it as a passion, as something you would just do as a hobby, or something you would do for your own edification or whatever. But there was always a healthy sense of, how am I going to pay my rent and keep my lights on and do all that. And that was good, because you worked harder, not having the free time to sit around and read and write and dream all day. You had to be practical about it. So I didn't go to my writing partner, Hawk Ospey, went to film school at BU. He liked it, but it didn't help him necessarily get any inroads to the business. So basically, we just went into it, training ourselves, reading whatever books we could, writing, and then just trying to find one little thread into the business, joining competitions, placing pretty well, and then you could write a query letter to a producer saying, hey, I out of 5,000 scripts, we came in the top 100, would you have a look? Little tiny inroads, and you just started piece by little tiny miserable piece by piece. You started to build some momentum over 10, 12 years or whatever. But in terms of, and I'd say now even it would be similar with, I know the internet has changed everything. There's so many more inroads and ways to put your stuff out there. But I would say, technology has really made things, much more accessible, knowledge, and also like, competitions and society, organizations, screenwriting, there's a ton more to go on, but now everyone has access to that. So I feel like the competition part of it is still just as daunting, in the sense of, it's still hard to find that first inroad, and what it is for us, and I'd say for anyone, was just you just keep on chipping away at one place where you can get in, and then use that to build some momentum, and use that to find the next small piece. So it was a very brick by brick, slow, gradual. There was never any eureka moment where we figured it out or someone swooped in, and but things culminated around First Snow, because one thing we did learn, and I'd say this is worth mentioning, was we wrote a lot those first few years, trying to chase the marketplace and figure out, what are they buying, what do they want, what are they looking for, let's write that. We were constantly chasing things that had been successful, and what we were doing is we were writing I'd say pretty inauthentically well, but not from the heart, not from our own voice, not from our own stories. That led to a lot of, hey, good script, but no one was really biting. It wasn't until when we wrote First Snow, it was finally we just got tired of rejection and wrote something completely from the heart that we both loved, that we both wrote really to film ourselves and, maybe as our last hurrah before we grew up and got real jobs for good. And that one broke through. The one that was authentic broke through, and I would say that's because it seems like an obvious lesson and everyone says it, but we knew it, but we didn't practice it for 5, 6, 7 years. We were writing for the win, the sale, try to hit the target that someone else was painting for you. And what we ended up doing was writing a lot of derivative stuff that was not bad, but it wasn't. So many people know how to write now, but so few people still have their own voice, and that's what people responded to with us. And that's what I'm always looking for when I'm hiring writers, and that when it's what is your life experience that nobody else knows. That's what I want. And that's even more important than good craft is your own, because you can learn craft, but you can't, people who want to put their own stories out there and their own voice, and you're like, wow, I've never seen the world through that exact perspective. That's what you want in a writer, and that's what they were looking for from us too. And it just took us a very long time to trust that, because we're like, who cares about my story? Who cares about what I'm obsessed about? Who really cares? You almost feel embarrassed to write your own stories, because why would anyone care? And then you find out, because that's the one thing that you have that makes you unique. It's the one thing you have as a writer. It's maybe the most important thing, and people tend to shy away from their own greatest gift, which is their own story. And we did it too. And I just say, like, when you're at the crossroads sort of like write commercially or write your own heart. I mean, it's definitely go with your own gut and write the things you love and care about, because that's what other people will respond to. That was I only blab about it because it's a very simple lesson, but I don't know why we didn't trust that at first. We needed to kind of go the wrong path for a long ways before we would trust, our own stories.
I think it's like to me, like self-doubt is just part of the makeup of a writer.
Yeah.
Like when I meet someone who's a writer director, I often sit back and I think to myself, is this person more of a writer or more of a director? And if they have like apparently zero self-doubt, I think you're more of a director.
Yeah.
And if they're riddled with self-doubt, they're a
Yeah.
writer to me. And
Yeah.
I think the gift of that is that you see the world from lots and lots of different points of view.
Yeah.
But I think that's an immensely helpful thing. And I will just say for those that this is an international film festival, so people join us from all over the world. But for those who are Irish based about competitions, if you're a member of the Writers Guild of Ireland, they collate all the opportunities that are available in these islands. So just, for the audience, if you are not, and to be an associate member of the Guild costs half nothing, if you're not yet part of the living as a writer, it's a very, very modest fee for membership, but you will find out they have curated all that information,
Right.
which is a great gift. But First Snow is the first film that we're going to talk about today. So there's a few clips that we're going to have a look at, but one of the first ones is right near the top. So I mean, you did attract a stellar cast, although you were unknown writers at that time. So Guy Pearce is playing the main character, and he breaks down in a small dusty town. And the scene, I'm always looking for a scene right near the beginning of a movie where I go, I'm in safe hands. And I just think that's so important. And for me, like, this is just a couple of minutes in, but he gives a sales pitch. So we don't know, I think, at this stage what it is that he sells, but we find out. So let's just have a look at this clip.
Listen, Enrique, I've been on the road since 7. I'm a salesman. I got a wife at home. We got a baby due this week. My wife gets really fucking nervous when I'm held up.
Like I said, this evening at best.
Any interesting diversions around here?
There's some cliffs about a mile walk. Pretty sunsets.
Hey, Pete, wasn't it? Listen, I got a contact in Phoenix who's giving me a very sweet deal on a fleet of retired Jukes. Wurlitzers. The vintage 1015s, classic Americana. Fully refurbished. Oh. And they've all still got the original 45s in them. No shit. You stick one of those babies in here, you got the classiest joint in 100 miles.
I've already got a jukebox.
Talking about a Wurlitzer, Pete. A 1015, 1015. Most popular jukebox model of all time. People can't help but stuff them full of cash. Looking around here, I kind of get the impression you're a guy who gives a shit about his place, yeah? You got new pool tables, bathrooms are very clean, liquor's arranged just so. Guy with his own sense of style. So think about it. Right there, a glowing tribute to Presley, Otis Redding, Buddy Holly, guaranteed money magnet.
Says here you sell flooring.
Yeah, right now I do, but in a few months I'm breaking out on my own. The bigger and better. Now, what's with the reception around here?
The thing that I found amazing about that scene was like one of the many jobs I did to support myself was sales. And I've never before seen sales well portrayed in the movies. Like even in a movie like The Wolf of Wall Street, I was like, that's not how sales works, right? You know, sales doesn't work when you talk about the product. Sales works when you talk about the other person, right? So I was just so interested to know, like, and that was the moment where I went, oh, this is going to be great, right? This is going to be great. So can I just ask you, like, you know, how much thought you put into that? Where did that come from? All of that?
Yeah, I think it was, you know, there was, you know, I certainly love, you know, the fast talking salesman in movies, Glengarry Glen Ross. And again, I think that's this hyper stylized version of, I mean, you know, nobody sells like that probably if they want to sell anything, because it's so, it's a steamroller approach. But just, you know, the idea of, I always love the idea of, and this comes from my dad as well. He had a little bit of, you know, he came to America and he still had a very thick, you know, Tipperary accent, and he felt like he was trying to, and people always were looking at him as, you know, he's not an American, he's not like, you know, this, you know, he was still in college, but he was trying to get into the business world, and one of the things he cultivated was this very, you know, not John Wayne accent, but that kind of attitude of the American cowboy, the American, you know, the American winner, you know, that type of thing. And he put it on like a mask in a way. He could flip in and out of his accent, but he cultivated an American accent, a way of talking to people, a sales pitch for himself, really, about, well, I'm the guy you want type of thing. And so, you know, he always knew it was a bit of a wink about it. It wasn't something he, you know, he knew it was selling. You're selling yourself. You're finding out what does the other person need, and how do I emotionally reach them. So that was kind of mostly from my dad. And you know, I love that there's the documentary called Salesman about the Bible salesman. I think the Maisels brothers did this. It's a beautiful black and white documentary about you know, the misery and the glory and the misery of being a salesman. And there's the Willie Loman, kind of all those archetypes of there's a bit of a desperation in salespeople who are, you know, they're you know, they're good at it, but there's something a little bit sad and desperate about selling if you're not a fully formed person. I met a lot of people in sales who, you know, they were anxious people, and I went to business school, like I said, so I learned a lot about marketing and sales, and about, you're not selling drill bits, you're selling holes, you know, that kind of idea. The obvious stuff, you're selling a need, and you're trying to attach it to what does the person sitting across from you really want. So we just went into this whole thing about, you know, aren't you proud of this place, this bar? But wouldn't a Wurlitzer jukebox just totally, you started something amazing here, but this will like bring it all together, like, like the rug and Big Lebowski, it ties it all together, that kind of BS kind of spiel that makes someone feel like, oh yeah, this guy really sees this isn't just a dumpy dive bar. This is my place, and he suddenly puffs his chest out. That kind of men talking to men, puffing each other up thing was it just felt like a really natural way that we could make him a little sleazy, but also he gets it. He gets how to talk to people and win them over, and push their emotional buttons to get a sale. So it felt like just let's have fun with it and not try to go Glenn Ross with it, which is super. I love listening to that dialogue, but it's such a, you're in a different movie world. It's hard to be realistic in a world where people are talking in these incredible play-like soliloquies about sales. We wanted to bring it down a few notches and have it feel like this could really be a real moment, a realistic moment, not just a hyper sales pitch that people who love movies would only appreciate. So I wanted to, give an insight to the guy's character, that he has something special. He's not just a fast talking salesman. He actually has a gift of connecting with people.
That's what was so beautiful about it, and it was that beautiful rule of three, but the three details about, here's how I know you're a man who takes pride in what he does, and funny, I didn't think it necessarily needed to be men to men. It was just the focus switched to the other person, and then the flattery, but also, he did take cognizance. He was like, your restrooms are really clean. This is really nice. It was just really, there was a lot, it was beautifully done, so the next thing that we were going to look at from this is I call this scene a reluctant prophet. So it's interesting because there's this counteraction that this is a guy who's all about, like, he's a sales guy, so he's about hitting his targets, but this he goes for fun for a reading, and then the guy gives him his money back. And then, I mean, I'm only telling you the plot, but it's just to catch everybody who's listening up, but then, like, as cynical as he is, the prophecies start coming true. So he wants to know more. So again, you got this amazing actor, J.K. Simmons. I don't think he had won the Oscar yet, right?
No, not yet. Yeah, we were lucky. We got him before he took the world by storm. So we got him a little before that.
Yeah, I mean, lucky or like really, really, really good taste, because I noticed this goes through your movies that, like, people, or particularly in First Snow, that like almost all of these people went on to like superstardom. I mean, even someone like Shea Wiggum, that, like, you don't. He's not a household name, but he's always working
everywhere.
Yeah. Okay, so so just then talk about like what you were doing there, the contrast there. We'll have a look at the clip first.
Bet you didn't figure on seeing me again, huh? And again, maybe you did. You going somewhere?
I'd like to do some fishing up Abiquiu Lake. Good this time of year.
I hear ya. Listen, how about last time?
What about it?
Well, I gotta tell you, when I first came over here, I didn't buy it, the whole shtick.
Gave you your money back?
I know. But certain things have happened. Coincidences. Stuff you couldn't have known unless...
I'm a performer, Mr. Starks. A salesman. You said it yourself.
Yeah. A performer doesn't stop halfway through an act, and a salesman certainly doesn't give refunds. Now, the Wolves game, this money my boss promises me out of the blue, you knew that was coming from Dallas. What are the chances of that?
A few lucky guesses. My gift to you.
That seizure thing you had, what was up with that? You see something, or what?
Even if I could, see things. What would it matter? Go live your life. Forget about all this.
Listen, I'm sure you've got some code of ethics or something, but I had a bit of a scare a few days ago. My health. Is that it?
Good day.
Yeah, so that was, really to contrast the bar scene with, the master salesman perhaps meets his match with someone even better than him, who the fortune teller played by J.K. Simmons, and it was really an attempt to, the idea of he's using a bag of tricks that perhaps Jimmy, the character, doesn't realize, which is you reject someone's money, you reject their business, you kind of the way the old the gypsy grifters used to in New York, to you with the bag of money or with burning the money, or there's a lot of these tricks. Once you get into the supernatural realm, you kind of it will work for some people, it will completely leave other people cold. But if someone has a psychological need or something broken in them, you might just find your way in. And so I'd say if the guy was a grifter, he would fail 9 times out of 10, but the 10th person you'd find that they need to hear this. There's something broken in them that you can actually get a little hook into them by refusing to finish the transaction, refusing to take the money, refusing to play by the rules of salesmanship, which is you don't refuse the sale. And if you do, it only has someone leaning in further, which is setting them up for a bigger payday. So the idea of taking a sales transaction and turning it into an upping of the game. If we wanted to play where if this guy's a grifter, he's a really good one, but if he's not, that's bad news for our character. So it was just another attempt to do a sales scene, but take it to another level where the story splits now. Are we dealing with a salesman? Or are we dealing with a prophet who does know things, and he's really doesn't want anybody's bad news? He's trying to get away from this situation as quickly as possible. And you left completely in the middle, and even a smart salesman like Jimmy has no idea which it is. And that hopefully, spurs the plot on now to the next complication, which is you don't know who you're dealing with in terms of the salesman.
And that's the beginning of the descent. And I think somebody else actually, explains that later, going, yeah, he knows. Actually, I think, he says like 49 out of 50 won't bite, but like the 50th will. So, that's what he's doing here. And it was just great. It was sophisticated, one of the things that I found really skillful in this storytelling is that it's always pointing the audience into the future of the story and telling them what to hope and fear and what to be anxious about, which to me is just like, that's the game, that you're playing with the audience who want to enter into your story. So, I mean, there were so many more clips that I chose, but we would only ever talk about First Snow if we watched them all, right? But I just wanted to look at this last clip, which is now he's starting to unravel, and his partner Deirdre is, really thinking, what the hell's going on, right? But so he now wants her to try to. So he's bringing her. She's supposed to go in cold and ask about her partner, right? So he's trying to see, like, is the guy gaming him or not? But I just really liked this scene because there's a great dramatic tension in it. So it doesn't feel like clunkily going, okay, here is the thing that we're going to do next. Audience, watch this, that there's a great dramatic tension in it and a great twist, actually, as well, of this clip. So we'll just have a look at this one.
What am I supposed to think? You're living your life by what a fortune teller said.
Seems McClure failed to report into his parole officer, but with his type, this is fairly routine. He's probably off on a bender somewhere.
So, you're not doing a fucking thing till he comes here and sticks a bullet in me, is that right?
Sir, there's no indication he intends to cross state lines or do you any harm. Now, this is a routine situation, and we're checking in.
Routine what? He's coming here. What the fuck's it gonna take?
Mr. Starks, if you'd like to talk to a counselor...
I just want you to go in there by yourself and tell the guy you want a reading, okay? It's easy. Just ask about the future, you know? Anything to do with us. Marriage, kids, whatever.
Marriage and kids, that's news to
If
me.
he says something's gonna happen to me, don't freak out. Just ask him what it is. But the fucker has a problem answering a direct question, so you might have to lay on the tears or... Okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think what you said was something I think it really bears repeating, that the game with the audience, and this goes for drama, for thrillers, for really anything, is, you have sophisticated audiences who have seen everything. They know all the archetypes. There are no new ideas, but the challenge now is to, how do you arrange the pieces and set up emotional dominoes falling so that you can constantly try to bring a new, not necessarily fool the audience, but bring a new emotional experience by the unexpected happening or the inevitable happening, but in a way you never expect. All that's the whole game of screenwriting, and it is a bit of a game with the audience when because I think dialogue is important, character development, all the things you hear about, but a lot of people don't talk as much about structure, which is really, I don't know what it is technically, but for us it's, what scenes in what order, what card are you turning over and showing the audience, what are you withholding, what are you choosing to reveal now or not now, that whole Hitchcock game of revelation and withholding, that's screenwriting in a nutshell. That's the whole thing. And even in a drama where you're invested straightforwardly in characters, and you still need to you want to take people on an emotional experience that is, I mean, sometimes things are predictable and wonderful. You're like, oh, it played out exactly like I thought, but it was still, the acting, everything, it was a great journey. But when you can give someone a new experience or a new way of looking at the world, or little facets of people's personalities or characters, and find a way to do that. It's fun to think of it as a game, like with a child, where you're playing like this, withholding and revealing, holding back emotion. Sometimes, like in The Expanse, we held back one character's emotion for like with a dam, like we held everything back for like a season and a half, because we wanted to lead up to something that when that dam broke, it would flood you, it would overwhelm you, it would be devastating. And the only way to do that is to keep on holding back, and almost till you hate the character. You don't like the guy because he has chances to be really human and really good and do the right thing, and he doesn't. And so you build up resentment, you build up, but you're constantly wanting to love this person, but they won't let you. And then when the reveal, when you want to get that, you've had so much built up, it's almost when I listen to U2, I always there's this thing that they do, and I only hear on headphones, but they'll give you this sweet sort of lovely chord progression or little riff. Then they'll leave it for a long time, and you're just wanting so bad to get that beautiful resolution again, but they're like, no, we're taking you here. And then when it crashes down, you're just like, oh, that's, I think music is something that the older we get and the more we do this, we really turn to music as the guide to how to write well, is listen to music, because it has all of the deep subconscious stuff that you're trying to do in your writing. Music does it. It just bypasses sort of your brain and goes somewhere deeper. And that is really worth, no, I don't know if anyone's formally done it, but it feels to me like the hidden ingredient in storytelling that is hard to quantify, but is so powerful, is music and musicality and rhythm and pacing. It's something that sounds sort of technical and after the fact, but it's really almost as important as everything else. The pace at which you tell your story, the rhythm and the music and the withholding and the resolution of things, which is all very, I hear it in music. I'm like, that's how I want the story to feel. When you hear great music, you're like, that's what I want people to feel like right here, is the way that song crashes right there and just breaks your heart in a second, because that's what it's doing to your soul, you know, which and screenwriting, everyone's thinking, oh, you got to explain it, but really you have to bypass the brain. The brain will always lead you astray because it's trying to give you information and explain things, but music just goes right to the, you know, I think Shane McGowan always said that, like you know, it punches you in the gut, you know, then it touches your heart, and then eventually your brain catches up way down the pike, but your gut feels it first, your instinct, your kind of, and that's what good stories do. And I don't know if the creators even know like how they're doing it, but that's what they're doing, is they're hitting you emotionally.
Yeah, some people do know and some people don't.
Yeah.
Right? So some are instinctive writers. I actually have seen somebody break down a screenplay in comparison to a symphony. But yeah, but you have to understand classical music for that to work for you. Otherwise, it's just like, wait a minute, here's two things I don't understand, right? You know, but it's interesting because I work as an editor, and sometimes people are like, don't talk to me about structure, I don't want to know, or craft or whatever. And like the analogy that I would make is, look, there's a difference between noise and music.
Yeah.
And that's the difference between your first draft and your last draft. Like the first time you're just going to put everything down.
Yeah.
And then you're going to go, okay, yeah, this, does this riff even belong here? Maybe that's for another song, or, but the thing that you said about withholding, it really reminds me of one of my favorite moments in the movies of the moment when Rick in Casablanca.
Oh yeah.
Just as you described, you almost hate him because he's so withheld. And then there's the moment where Victor Laszlo, the Germans are all singing Die Vaterland, and Victor Laszlo goes, play la Marseillaise, play it. But the band leader looks at Rick, and Rick goes,
yeah.
And your heart just,
yeah.
And I saw a documentary where somebody was going, what an amazing actor Humphrey Bogart is, that just by him doing this, your heart explodes. And I was like, that was the storytelling.
Yeah.
That was the story. I mean, I'm not taking anything away from Humphrey Bogart, but that took a lot of courage to wait till season 2 in The Expanse. Was this trusting yourselves?
Yeah, well, it was, there's a scene in the second book. It's a series of novels, and it was the scene when I read the second book and got to the moment I'm talking about with this character. I was like, I want to make this show. That one scene made me want to do the whole project, because if we could pull off the way that scene just made me feel reading it, if we can make an audience feel that on the screen, this show is worth doing a million times over. So it was really a quest to tell that story, that one particular character's arc, and then the books go on, and we're really happy with the show as it goes on. But the goal was creatively was to make that moment as great as it felt on the page, to translate it, to bring it to the screen, and to make it, attempt to do what we talked about, attempt to, have, and Rick is Rick from Casablanca is, runs through everything we do. I mean, that's that character, and the way the withholding and the kind of the as and everyone loves Bogart because he's Bogart, but he he played him like really hard and tough and miserable, but when he breaks, it grabs you, and that had a lot of influence on The Expanse. Certainly Children of Men, we pitched Children of Men as Casablanca. That's how the P.D. James novel was quite a bit different, not in spirit, but in execution. And I don't think anyone was feeling it was a movie. They felt like it was a little too dour and a little too intellectual, kind of chilly, and not necessarily a movie. And I didn't know how to pitch for my life back then. I was the worst at pitching. I've learned, but man, I was just brutal at it. But the only thing we said worth a damn was, we said, this is Casablanca. Look, if you restructure it as a modern day telling of that love triangle in the midst of a world falling apart, you have a movie. And that's the only useful thing we said. That's why we got the job. And then I blathered on for 2 hours about the plot, and then everyone went to sleep. But I started with the important thing, and we got the job because Casablanca, everyone felt like if we could deliver on that promise in some way, then they were interested.
Did Clive Owen know that?
No, that was long before. It was still just a book, and it was. We started our career off by picking all the material. No one else really knew what to do with her. They kind of didn't want, because it was a tough adaptation. No one really. I don't think, everyone's like, how did you get that amazing job? It's like nobody really wanted it. It was sort of an ugly duckling in terms of material. It was science fiction, but not. It was sort of a thriller, sort of a character piece. It was an oddly positioned thing. It didn't fit into any genre cleanly. So it was one of those ones that Hollywood tends to run screaming from, because it's hard to pin down what it is. And that's exactly why we fell in love with it, and that's exactly why we wanted it, because we're like, these are the kind of movies we want to see. They don't fit neatly. They kind of bleed over the lines of different. It is a little bit. It reminded what it reminded me of. Everyone in my generation is obsessed with Ridley Scott's Blade Runner. We all wanted to make some version of Blade Runner. We were just still like worship that film. It's just kind of perfect. And when you look at the way that novel from Philip K. Dick evolved into the movie, and you see all the stages in between, you're like, that's what the gold standard was for us. Can we have an experience like that? And then I read Children of Men in Chicago on they just sent a photocopy of it, and I had that immediate feeling, this is our Blade Runner. This is what we've been looking for. This has the potential to be science fiction that doesn't feel like science fiction, because it's just really about people losing hope, and how does the world, without a future, how do people continue to carry on and hope and care about life when there is no future for the species? That is a fundamental thing that's been taken away. Anyway, we had this feeling, this is the Blade Runner experience, or it could be, and it did turn into that, which is that it's blessed to be part of one of those in your career, where it could have gone astray so many times. Other writers got involved after us, and it only got better and better and more. The movie that people, and then we were incredibly blessed with the director who was ready to do this at that time, and Cuarón was coming off a huge Harry Potter hit and was able to make this very crazy movie that anyway, it was one of those times where the planets aligned, and it was what we hoped for. When we first read it, we're like, this could be another Blade Runner type experience, and we luckily lived that out. It took 6 or 7 years, but it did come to pass, where we feel like it's when the system, everything goes right instead of everything goes wrong. Everyone tells you all the horror stories, but once in a while things have a weird spirit about them, or an angel on their shoulder, whatever, and they find their way to what they should have been, and that was one. So I'll never complain about the business, having had one experience that great, that where the movie is way beyond what you even could have imagined when you read the book.
Well, because I remember reading the book long before it was a film, and the thing that I remember most vividly, and it does stay in the film, it's the Pam Ferris character as a midwife. So that's how the book starts, as I recall, and it did stay in it, is that a midwife is turning over the pages, and suddenly goes, wait a minute, I don't have anyone booked in for, whatever it is, 7 months hence. And then she starts ringing her colleagues, and they're like, no, we've got nothing. And that's the first apprehension of it. And then we fast forward, and there's all this like great weird stuff in the book about priests secretly doing baptisms for puppies and things.
Right.
Couples are pretending, but it's like, the church is like, you're not allowed to do that, but priests are doing it. It's just great. But the thing that's amazing, and it is, I know many people that it's like their all-time favorite movie. So you did create the Blade Runner for the next generation, but the thing that's amazing watching it again is how prescient it is. So you were writing that long before Brexit, and long before immigrants were in cages on the borders of America. Does that weird you out?
Well, yeah, it was just the 15th anniversary, and we did a couple of talks about it with and that was the pandemic thing, this thing happening that no one can control, that feels like it's got humanity by the throat, that I don't think most of us have ever felt anything like that, the powerlessness of having something happen that's nature, and we really don't have a say in the matter, and the economics and the politics and Brexit and all these things. So in some ways it's timeless, because we seem to we operate in cycles. We think we learn things, and then generationally we seem to have to relive the same horrors again. So in some ways you're like, it was prescient. In some ways it was just looking back to what do people do when they're afraid. And we just, we just went through it in this country. There's a lot of rage in this country about powerlessness, about the future, about the changing nature of our society, all these things that you would say are great things. And there's a huge segment of terror, people who feel powerless, and it manifests in all those things. And I feel like that's the part of the human animal. You're like, wow, is that the thing we can transcend? So, I mean, to give credit where it's due, Alfonso Cuarón and his writing partner, they really, the Sojourners and all these, those themes were in P.D. James's novel. And, we explored them in our drafts, but he really burrowed into that and made that, and introduced Key as the pregnant woman. That wasn't in the book, because he really wanted to explore that more powerfully than the book did, and more centrally. So yeah, it's weird looking at it in some ways. I'm like, I'm happy that the film is timeless. I'm also depressed that it's timeless, because we're still playing the greatest hits of mankind, the same fears, the same tribalism, the same obsession with turning other people into the other and demonizing them. And if you have, all it takes is a push. And in that story, it's the infertility and the dwindling of resources. But in our country, just recently, it's the sense that opportunity is changing and demographics are changing. It's stuff that in a healthy society should be, but it unleashed a firestorm of real anger and terror among a huge segment of our population. That and you realize, wow, have we learned nothing? So in some ways, and I think we are better off having had that experience. But the movie, as prescient as it seems, it's almost like it's we're just going through the cycle again of people being afraid of the future and afraid of change, and manifesting it in the same old ways, which is to find someone who's the cause of it and hang it on them and oppress those people, because somehow the pandemic in that story is nobody's fault, but you still find someone, oh, well, they're going to take resources away. They don't belong in this country.
Mm-hmm.
England for the English, we have to protect what's ours, and other people, and so you find an enemy as a way to deal with terror that you can't get rid of it. It's the gods.
Well, let's one of the things I think is really skillfully done here, and look, you have to do it in every movie, even if it's about somebody that from your stance is living an ordinary life, but you gotta like go, boom, this is the world, have you got it? To the audience before, and obviously introduce a main character. And looking at this again, I was so impressed with the craft of this introduction of the world and the main character in the same moment.
The Muslim community demands an end to the army's occupation of mosques.
The Homeland Security Bill is ratified. After 8 years, British borders will remain closed. The deportation of illegal immigrants will continue. Good morning. Our lead story.
The world was stunned today by the death of Diego Ricardo, the youngest person on the planet. Baby Diego was stabbed outside a bar in Buenos Aires after refusing to sign an autograph.
Witnesses at the scene say that Diego spat in the face of a fan who asked for an autograph. He was killed in the ensuing brawl. The fan was later beaten to death by the angry crowd. Born in 2009, the son of Marcelo and Silvia Ricardo, a working-class couple from Mendoza, he struggled all his life with the celebrity status thrust upon him as the world's youngest person.
Diego the youngest person on the planet, was 18 years, 4 months, 20 days, 16 hours, and 8 minutes old.
Yeah, so much to like unpack there, like just a couple of minutes and now I'm totally oriented in the world and I know everything I think I need to know about this guy to go on the journey with him. So I always want to ask people when I see like a masterful scene like that, did it come out of you like that first time or did you have a couple of goes around or, how did that come out?
Yeah, well, that's one of those sort of indicative of the project in general. That's pure like Quaron, the sort of doing this great touch of evil, kind of unbroken, connect all the worlds, get the exposition out of the way, have it be a very simple kind of, it's just a guy getting a cup of coffee. So you have, you walk in there, you walk out, you get the terrorism angle, you get the baby Diego stuff, you get that helps you explain the conceit of the movie. And you get to see how devastated everyone is by their, sort of someone who meant something to them, a symbol almost of the hope. Now that he's gone, all is lost. So you get like 50 things going on. You establish the world, you see the rickshaws, you see the dumpy look, everything looks depressed and gray. And then you get this great terrorist act and also the fact that our hero almost just bought it, So that's just pure Quaron. That's like, I always think of it as like, I thought Touch of Evil was the greatest opening scene of all time, but this is given a run for its money in terms of just pure cinema, visual storytelling, and so so that is all him. But the book starts with the death of baby Diego. And I thought we were smart enough to not screw that up and take that moment, because the death of a celebrity who embodies the weird idea of the movie, which is he was the youngest person in the world, no one's been born since. It was so succinct, so simple, so it told so much so easily. So that was in the book. We brought it to the early drafts of the script and it stayed. And then but who would have known how he dramatized it. And he also put the terrorist bombing as the capper to that. He brought that was in earlier drafts, and in the book the idea of random terrorist acts and stuff was sort of much later. You didn't have it all in the beginning. So it's really one of those bravura kind of shots where you tell a mountain of story and boring exposition all visually. And so it was one of those, from the book to the script to the screen, it only got better, but the same intent, which is let's get people in this world quickly and make it understandable. What is the dilemma facing mankind, and how's our hero connected to that? And boom, right in. So it's pure movie making genius, that stuff.
Well, the part that I like that I focus on the most is that everybody else is like, oh no, and he wants his coffee. Like, so I immediately go, oh, look at like the fact that like everything else is still and wrapped and he's just no, like he's and I love that like later on it turns because he says to his boss,
I'm so overcome.
Yeah, I'm more upset than I realized about the baby Diego, but it reminded me of like being in Edinburgh the day after Lady Diana died, and I was like, oh, that was a lot. What are we having for breakfast?
Yeah, and everyone
and the
else.
British were all like, I was only just getting to understand. But and then of course, like, why does he want his coffee? Because he puts whiskey in his coffee, and in his morning coffee. So then again, what do I know about him? And there's just so much about the character as well as the world that's happening there. So, I mean, again, I just picked it because I thought anybody who's looking for a masterclass in how to open their film, you know. And you know, one of my favorite openings of all time is John Huston's Fat City.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you remember how it opens, but like Stacey Keach is in a kind of pretty crappy hotel, but he gets up and he puts his cigarette in his mouth and then he can't find a light, you know.
Yeah.
And it's like, even if you're not a smoker, you start going, oh, 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 and you just identify with his desire to light a cigarette, and he tries to light it off the stove, and you know, even, and like he, you know, and eventually he has to stumble out into the light and get a light off someone. But by the time, you know, like 90 seconds later, you're totally identified with this guy. And I love this because even though I myself, I'm a machine that runs on tea, I understand when people want their coffee, they want their coffee, you know. So there's this micro dramatic tension of, will he get his coffee? And I want him to get his coffee, you know, and he doesn't get his coffee, you know. It's like, it's just amazing. I just thought it was amazing, amazing, and just beautiful craft. Again, I've picked loads and loads of clips that we're not going to have time to look at all of them. But like, you know, this is, as we discussed, like it's a Rick from Casablanca kind of a character. And he has a secret grief. So I just want to talk about this scene where we learn about his secret grief. And I think it is at 53. So let me just find it. There's so many others, but like our time is limited, and people's attention is limited. So we don't want to make this a 10-hour masterclass, but I'm sure that we could. So just to catch people up, if they haven't rewatched Children of Men recently, his ex-wife has recruited him to help. She has died, and he has inherited her mission. Is that a fair way to say it? So there's this one young woman who's pregnant, and everybody wants a piece of her, right? You know, so they were with the Fishes, who are this terrorist group, but he learned, Theo, our anti-hero, learned that they were planning to kill him.
Come on.
Everything is a mythical cosmic battle between faith and chance.
Maybe I shouldn't.
You already did. Take another one. Now cough. What do you taste?
Strawberries.
Strawberries. That's what it's called, strawberry cough.
Wicked.
So, you've got faith over here, right? And chance over there.
Like yin and yang.
Sort of.
Oh, Shiva and Shakti.
Lennon and McCartney.
Look, Julian and Theo.
Yeah, there you go. Julian and Theo met among a million protesters in a rally by chance. But they were there because of what they believed in the first place, their faith. They wanted to change the world, and their faith kept them together. But by chance, Dylan was born.
This is him?
Yeah, that's it. He'd have been about your age, magical child. Beautiful. Their faith put in praxis.
Praxis? What happened?
Chance. He was their sweet little dream. He had little hands, little legs, little feet, little lungs. And in 2008, along came the flu pandemic. And then by chance, he was gone.
Oh, Jesus.
You see, Theo's faith lost out to chance. So, why bother if life's going to make its own choices?
Watcha, baby's got Theo's eyes.
Yeah.
It's terrible. But you know, everything happens for a reason.
That I don't know. But Theo and Julian would always bring Dick. He loved it.
Okay, so I have this theory that I developed myself, that a character can't ever show self-pity. So somebody telling their own sob story, even though it's a genuine grief, like if Theo was sitting in front of me and he told me, well, you know, we had this baby who didn't live, I would feel nothing but compassion for him. But if a character makes a plea for compassion on the screen, I'm like, it repels me. So I just thought it was really interesting to see this, that somebody else tells it, you know, and the mise en scène again was brilliant, you know, that the somebody else doesn't know that he's there, but that's what we're looking at is his face, and you know, he's doing what great actors do, which is almost nothing, you know. So I just wanted to, you know, hear your, you know, how you'd come to that scene.
Yeah, I think that was sort of the key to some of that is in P.D. James's novel of, but there wasn't the really when the Casablanca thing was never a conscious thing. It just hit you like a thunderclap, like you saw elements of a story in a book, and suddenly that archetype helped you figure out how to bring them together and kind of break what was there and put it back together in a way that felt like a movie. And what was important is that for us, the number one thing is, you know, what in Casablanca, without his history with Elsa, I believe her name was, and the sort of his heart was ripped out and he just stitched it back together and moved on. But he's a sort of a walking knot of scar tissue. The Rick is just like scar tissue, and Theo, if to have that, we felt like he's got to have. And that's, you know, and I worked on this before I had kids of my own. I don't know if I could have, you know, it would have been unbearable to think of this stuff, you know, back in the days when I was single and not a dad. But the idea that the pain something had to be so great in his past with Julian and connected to them, that shut him down completely, but also is the thing that it's hard for him to tear that open again and re-engage with the world.
But did you and Hawk have a conversation about the fact that it couldn't be Theo who told Theo's backstory? Were you trying to figure, because obviously in a novel, the narrator can just tell us that, but in a movie, somebody has to tell us that. And did you make a conscious choice that it wouldn't be him, or was it that instinct?
I think the idea was to like you said, never to have the hero groveling about their own misery. Like it definitely was a I think there was a character who was in the book and jettisoned from you know later drafts who was telling the story. It wasn't Jasper in the way it was staged here, but it was someone from his past telling, you know, oh, this is what happened, this is what was, you know, this is what was lost. I think and Cuarón does it several times in the story, which I think is just a staging he loves, which is to have that mise en scène broken frame with this whole thing going on, and someone, yeah, very Shakespearean in a way, like, and manages to make it feel very sort of affected to have someone overhearing a very important moment. But he's really great at staging those, and this one was beautiful the way he had them completely separated. You could register his pain, they couldn't, and you know and also you said is what that guy can do with nothing but the tiniest facial expression. Just it's worth 100 monologues of dialogue, just the listening and the reacting. With such an incredible actor like Clive Owen, you can communicate all that just with him listening stoically and then walking away. So the idea was definitely to the intent was definitely in the script. The staging was purely the director's, the way he because that's a long scene of and a lot of information. How do you make it feel like it's not a data download of? That's always the tricky part with exposition, but I feel like that's how you do it. You create that tension in the frame. It's not just, I'm going to tell you a bunch of stuff, you know, take notes. There's a drama going on between the two halves of the screen. So that is really, again, just genius directing.
Well, I mean, yeah, and I mean, you can't say it, but it's also just great, great, great writing that it's like we're getting that information while we're focused on something else. And one of the things I did love is the fact that, like, you know, yeah, there's his pain, and but in their conversation, there's joking and toking, and you know, like they're in a completely different place, and that contrast really heightens our compassion for him, right? The last clip that I'm going to show is kind of an unusual one, I think, to have picked out of all of this film. But again, I just think it's like really important. We're kind of moving into Act 3, where always, you know, the jeopardy has to increase and the pace has to increase. It's probably going back to that thing you were talking about in music again, you know. But this is the Peter Mullen character has come in. He's like a crooked cop who works at Bexhill, which is the and I have to do a shout out to my friend Karen from Bexhill that I saw this movie with, and she was just like, yes, it would be the worst place you could possibly end up, you know. But they're actually trying to break into Bexhill because they've figured out it's the only way. But I just, you know, it's a great performance from Peter Mullen again. But again, I thought what you did was, you know, download a load of information that the audience has to hold on to, but in a really interesting way, that it's all sort of dramatically interesting again. So let me just share screen again, and we will drop in this clip.
She's not going to puke, is
No,
she?
she's fine.
Puking's bad. Very, very bad. Doesn't wash out. Smell never goes away. Usually, it's people trying to get out of Bexhill, not in. Sid doesn't know why you want to get in. Sid doesn't want to know. Sid doesn't care.
Just breathe. Just breathe.
What's wrong with her?
Minor contraction. It's normal. Just breathe.
When you're released, stroll out with the other Fugees. Look for the statue of a soldier. There you'll meet a woman, Marika. Arab, tipsy, something. Always carries a shaking little dog with her. She'll find you accommodation for tonight. All right. Your Fugees now. Show us the Fuji face. Sad face. Sad Fuji face. That's good. That's good. Okay. Out! Come on. Come on, come on. Hurry up. Move.
Hey!
Eh? Eh?
So yeah, again, you know, something that, you know, I struggle with as a writer, and I hope struggle with other writers helping them to do it, is transmitting information without stopping the story, and making it, you know, obvious, right? So I just thought this was a great example of that.
Yeah, I would definitely again give a shout out to the directing, in the sense of, so the story, you know, you need right at the sort of the crescendo of the birth coming, there's going to be a tremendous amount of jeopardy and amount of being discovered, and we sort of followed more of the book's trajectory, which was to have the jeopardy be, it's closing in on all sides, it's closing in all the time, but you know, as with the book, they're kind of on the road, moving, you know, trying to find a safe house, trying to find some place where they're not, everyone's looking for them, they've been on the news, whatever, so there's tons of jeopardy. And what Quaron did was, and Tim Sexton, they did the production draft of, there was also another writer, David Arata, who was sort of bridging. So, you know, again, usually when there's multiple writers on a movie, it's like, be afraid, because it's probably a patched together train wreck. Like Blade Runner, this one went through different writers and different drafts, and everyone built upon everybody. It just was so lovely that everyone built towards the goal of telling a good story. It wasn't sort of this rewrite, tear down, build back up thing so you can get credit. It was none of that nonsense. It was just a very happy, lucky experience. But I will give Quaron really credit for taking the jeopardy that was sort of diffuse. It was it was the countryside. It was getting to a house. Can we get down this road? Da, da, da. Kind of the way it is earlier in the film. He decided, let's compress all that drama into Bexhill. Let's push it all into, they got to get into this camp. They got to go through the worst place in the world where all the, like, he just concentrated, which is what a great director does. He took a lot of information and just cooked it down to, let's put it in one, let's put all the drama into this funnel and have it all go there. So there's no way out. You can't go this, on the road, you can go this way or this way, whatever. Here you had nothing but one way forward to get to that boat, and it's all bad, and so much danger and so many forces against them, and allies, it turns out, as well. But it was just a genius staging of what could have been a good but kind of loose sequence, and he just said, I'm going to push it all into a cinematic kind of crucible. It's all going to go into the pot, and and there's no way out. There's no left, there's no right, there's one way through. And he funneled the story so it has the maximum kind of drama by getting rid of all. And that's another way I've kind of figured of, storytelling is about throwing away. It's never about adding stuff. It's about continuing to remove till only the important stuff is left. And that was a great version of how that worked, where he took, what does the story need to do? What's the best way to do it? And you have to take away possibilities for the heroes to get away, to move, to backtrack. Nothing. They have nothing. They're in a cage, and it only gets tighter and tighter and tighter till they finally are able to squeak out barely. That's like movie storytelling. It's all, he put it into a visual metaphor, which also tells the story of, the immigration, the horror of what's going on. He pushed it all into one tiny little dramatic space where it all plays out. And that's great directing. That's taking what's on the page and saying, what does this really need to do, and doing it, and by throwing away lots of possibilities. When characters have options, your drama is gone. When they have possibilities, when they can go this way or this way, the audience feels that the jeopardy is not really quite as much as it could be. So he threw away every single option for these poor people to survive, and for this baby to be born, and for things to be okay. He takes them all away from you, and he throws them in the pit, and they have to find their way through these, like the 9 circles of hell, to get out to this boat. And the boat's no great shakes either. Maybe they're going to die on the ocean, all of this horrible stuff. But so that's just great directing. And when we pitched the story, the first thing we said is, the only way this story works is if Theo dies in self-sacrifice. If he doesn't die at the end, the story doesn't make any sense to us, really. It's good, but it's not. The novel has a very different ending. And we just felt like if he doesn't kind of die this sad, noble, kind of messy, pathetic death, and for this greater good, then the story kind of loses its power. But the way he got that whole last act is just pure. That's just Orson Welles level directing.
So one of the things I just think all of that is so brilliant, and I think if people just took what you said at the last 5 minutes, if they just took that away from this masterclass, that would be amazing. That it's just keep taking possibilities away from your character, keep forcing them forward into hell, into really the mouths of hell. You've mostly written things that are very have a big action component, although we're going to take a minute now to look at your version of Iron Man, and I love how much emotion your Iron Man has. But how do you think that works in something that's less action driven? Because I think a lot of the people here in Europe, they don't have the resources, apart from anything else, to make, really big action driven things. But it's also maybe the sensibility. Most of the people that I know aren't writing big action dramas. They're writing things that are more, character driven pieces. So how does that work then on that level?
Yeah, I think Hawk is quite great at writing action and loves to come up with action you haven't seen before. But action, to read action sequences is among the most boring exercise. To read action on the page is a drag. I mean, no matter how well it's staged, how well it's written, it's almost like, oh, I got to read. It just doesn't come alive on the page, really. So the idea is to stage action in a way that is, the staging is brilliant, rather than it's just stuff, more mayhem, more that and you know, like what Cuarón did with Bexel, it's like make an action sequence out of a movie that doesn't, you could do it without a giant action set piece at the end, you could, but the place that he throws you into is a pure action, you know, setting. But Iron Man, you know, it was the first movie in that universe, and you know, we did shoot a lot of action that was not used, and then they redid it. But it was sort of feeling your way along, like how, but really that I'd say we like the more European sensibility, where, you know, a little action goes a long way, and really cleverly staged action really lingers. You don't need much of it. You don't need acres of it to tell your story. So Iron Man had a, you know, probably a production component, a time component, but a lot of the credit for that goes to Jon Favreau, and we've been very lucky to work with some amazing directors. He's old school. He loves classic Hollywood movies. At least this is, I'm not speaking for him, just what I observed about him, because we worked on that movie on set the entire time. It was kind of being rewritten and written and refashioned all the way through. It was never done until the filming stopped. But Favreau has this, he loves, you know, he had these like long set piece moments, the dance number where they talk for 5 minutes, or when she's replacing his heart, like little meet cute kind of romantic comedy moments, or character bonding moments, no action, no. So when we finished that film, and then Transformers was coming out right under, and we saw Transformers in the state of the art, incredible action, nonstop, Waldo, we were like, we are so screwed, because we don't have any of that. We have a couple of fun action sequences. We have, you know, it's good action, but it's nothing like you know, we did not lay it on thick, and we didn't, nothing like the Transformers or those kind of movies. And so we were like terrified that we're going to be this quaint little boring movie that, but John kind of knew that people want to fall in love with these characters. They want to spend time, they want to get to know, and you know, they wanted to fall in love with Robert Downey Jr. as a movie star, not just a great actor. They were falling in love with him as, you know, on this Johnny Depp level that he had never had the shot to do before. And so he gave him time to really shine, and to let the audience have that chemical reaction with him that clearly they had. It wasn't just, oh, he's a great actor, he's a movie star. And nobody, I think, truly grasped that till Iron Man, that he's a movie star. And so John let him have his moment to not be hiding behind blowing up crap and in the suit all the time. It's Robert, you know, it's these great actors getting a chance to be on screen, and just the love of classic Hollywood cinema, where you would trust great dialogue, great scenes between people, and let things unfold, let relationships unfold, even in a superhero movie you could have. So we were lucky to have a director who was very old school in that way. And I say that as a huge compliment, not as a, you know, and John's gone on to take over the world in so many other ways, but this was in a weird way, he brought his swingers kind of vibe, like let characters interact, let things happen, let dialogue, you know, let scenes play on longer than, so you get to know people. And that was sort of weird for a superhero movie, probably. And then once the universe took off, I think action really took over. I mean, you know, there's tons of great characters, but I think that was an opportunity to have a slower paced, less crowded, busy movie with lots of stuff blowing up. We got to, you know, not have to get obsessed with the action. So we wrote a couple of good sequences. Some of them we were like, oh, that's all we got. You know, they felt a little bit like there should have been more, but it held the movie together. And that wasn't what was important. Ultimately was the Robert was important, the characters were important, the relationships. And yeah, he's in a cool flying suit as well, and blowing some crap up and beating some bad guys. That was all, but that was down the list. That wasn't the obsession of the movie. It was more like, hey, here's, you know, Robert Downey Jr., here's this character. Their stories kind of meld in some interesting ways, and fall in love with this guy. You know, he's a mess. He's a jerk. He's a reprehensible asshole. I don't know if I can curse, but
yeah, don't worry.
You're gonna see a transformation. You're gonna see a bad man who suddenly starts to get it and maybe transform. So that's what the story's about.
Well, it was so interesting to me. I was saying to you, like, I remembered like really enjoying this way more than I expected to, and then, as the years have gone on, like, the Marvel films have become less and less interesting to me. I am not their target audience, but, I go to see an awful lot of things. And actually, the Irish actor Gabriel Byrne explained it to me by saying what those films give people is the experience of being in a video game, and that's what they want. So the narrative is just tent poles really to give them the set pieces, whereas, but this is also, I found this really interesting. My niece turned 18 yesterday, and I was at her birthday party, and I said, oh, I'm gonna interview this guy tomorrow. And my 16-year-old niece was like, I'm obsessed. And my 18-year-old niece was like, I really like it, but she's obsessed with it. It was just really interesting to go, oh, that's so, because they would have been babies when this film came out. So they've found their own way to it. And it's speaking to them. They watch it over and over again. And they couldn't really articulate why. But I think it might go back to the thing that you were talking about, which is powerlessness. Like particularly being a teenager in a pandemic, so just when the world should have been opening up to you, it closed down, you've been trapped with your parents, worst case scenario, and your auntie. No, they don't live with me, but I just mean like their social life has been so limited. But I mean, I don't know why, but what I do know is it's because this film has heart. So it's a really interesting, and actually the other one I thought of was Jessica Jones. Like I watch Jessica Jones and I forget that it's Marvel, because actually this is the creator of that. I think it's Melissa Rosenberg's her name. She's gone straight to the heart of it, and gone, what would it really be like to be Jessica Jones? But let's just have a look, because I think like I wanted to watch the opening because it's so interesting, but it's exactly what you're talking about. The Robert Downey Jr., he's a movie star, if you ever doubted it. Like, I'm enough of an age that I always had a crush on Robert Downey Jr. But let's just watch this. So again, it's this tricky business of how do you introduce the character, introduce the world, set up the tone, all of that. So will you just talk about the process that brought us to this great scene?
Yes, that was definitely an evolution. The first act used to go, here's Tony having a hot rod race with a Chinese billionaire. Like they shut down Vegas to have this ridiculous road race that only billionaires can do. Like there were like 5 scenes showing you, what kind of sort of playboy jerk, clueless, war profiteer essentially. There's a lot of like telling that stuff in a lot of very expensive scenes that didn't necessarily move the story forward. So we decided to take his sort of near death moment, put it up front, cycle back, and then catch up to that moment again, which worked really well. It gets you right into that whatever, enjoy his hubris, but it's not going to go well for him because you start off with how it went, then you show kind of what led him up to there, and then you cycle back. And that we didn't need 80 scenes to show that he's rich, that he's clueless, that he's a war profiteer, that he's funny and charming, whatever. You just kind of do that in one swoop. So it was a good lesson in throwing away again.
Yeah, okay, but like we were talking about this, the level of sophistication that there is in this film. So one of the things that you were talking about, like, so this is jumping back to Las Vegas, and I really love this scene. So I just wanted to talk about again, the exposition, but also the introduction of themes, and really quite a bit of sophistication, right? In this. So, sorry, let me cue up this clip. So, I mean, it has a great, there's a great back and forth, like you say, that old-fashioned movie making in the best possible way, the banter back and forth. But you're raising really serious issues there. I'm surprised you got it by the studio, to be honest.
Yeah, that scene's funny because that was written in a Starbucks like in 1 hour or two, because they wouldn't tell us who they were reading for the part, but they needed a quick scene to really get a lot of the issues of the movie in a rat-a-tat kind of dialogue driven. So I didn't know Robert was talked about. But anyway, that scene was written, and it almost didn't change at all. But it was a quick, punchy scene written to kind of get everything in play, and raise the, and also to give some cred to, like there is a point to be made that, with, if you don't have the world without a certain amount of, the level of chaos that the world faces without in America, but then it gets twisted to America never knows when to stop, keeping the peace and moving into conquest. There's all these issues, but not to make it totally one-sided, like we're liberal Hollywood people screeching about, anti-war. Like there's a point to be made of why do weapons exist? What did the A bomb? It did terrible things. It also created a huge, lasting era of peace. Blah blah blah. All those issues. Get them in. Get this sort of romantic, back and forth going, and get the exposition out quickly, and do it. And that was the last day of shooting. It was the first scene I wrote the last day of shooting, the very last day. So everyone was pretty tapped out at that.
Oh, well, it looks fantastic. But
yeah, Caesar's Palace, and that's it was. But no, but again, John knew how to, like, as much dialogue is in that scene, as much needs to be told just in the pictures and the visuals and the staging, everything. You get all that character stuff going on. While there, the dialogue is almost like the sparring, it's romantic sparring, it's love, it's hate, it's liberal versus conservative, it's all this stuff going on. And hopefully it all swirls together into something greater than the sum of its parts, which you want scenes to be. You don't want them to be intellectual. I think scenes should be messy and raw in a way where lots of tones come out of them, instead of like, we want you to think this, then feel this, then do, like, it's got to be very, very musical and organic, and each person might receive it differently. So
well, yeah, I mean, it's very Bogey and Bacall, and the other thing that's a great strength in it is that the viewpoint that may not be yours is being articulated as well as the viewpoint that might be, so, it's like, you always want to give, like, the nemesis also a great argument, right? But the next scene that I wanted to look at from Iron Man is where that, actually, I was very, very tempted, the thing you were saying about giving the characters and the emotions and the relationship space. I was very tempted to just do a Pepper Potts, like just do all of her scenes, which are all great, or all of his scenes with her. So this is the beginning of the moral transformation, where at least he's grappling with the questions. But it's a very interesting scene. There's a lot of dynamism going on in it. It's the introduction of the character who represents the unwieldy agency, the name with the unwieldy name, the agency with the unwieldy name, which I really like. But let's just have a look at, again, how this is done. There's also the business that he's been long.
A really cool scene to look at, because it was definitely, it was written many times, and it was kind of searching for what is the missing sort of ingredient, or the thing that, the information is really interesting, his emotional turmoil, all that stuff. But then we had a really interesting thing where Robert, this was totally his idea, improv, no warning. The whole idea of everyone sitting down, that just was his, he just came up with that. And suddenly a pretty good scene, I thought, took a whole nother, it went to another level, because now you have this strangeness. It was intimate, it was weird, it made everyone think, oh, the guy is suffering PTSD. It just added this dynamism and energy to the scene. That it was a good scene, but it's a lectern, and it's blabbing, and it's people listening, and there's only so much you can do with that. So he kind of blew it up in a great way by not really changing much of the scene, just changing the staging. And I thought it was a gorgeous scene because of that. And so, it's a collaborative medium. Sometimes you're working with these incredible people who make you look way better than you have the right to be, because the words were fine, but that really made the scene, I thought, and brought the vulnerability when he starts opening up and stuff. That puts you in a position of you see he's vulnerable, you see he's scared, you see for the first time, you see this little boy who's like kind of not sure what's next. Am I trashing my father's legacy, or am I doing what's right? Would he do this too? All these things now, I think, because he's putting himself in a vulnerable physical position on that stage, you suddenly can feel the scene. I don't know how to describe it, but it was one of those things where when he did it, you're like, oh yeah, that's what the scene was missing. Vulnerability, not just words. So anyway, you got to give credit where credit's due. We could say we staged that because we're so smart. No, we never thought of that.
But that's amazing. But it doesn't mean that another writer can't also go, okay, hang on, I've got this scene where somebody has to stand at a lectern and give a press conference, and I've seen that 1,000 times before. So visually, it's not that interesting. What could be interesting, and could it come out of the characters? So it, like, you know, it doesn't matter who, like, you come up with the idea, as long as somebody can, you know, make their work better, right?
Yeah.
And there is this really interesting thing, and you know, you and I had a brief chat before this, like where superheroes very often have dead fathers or are orphaned, you know, and that can feel like just a trope that's ticked, you know, so that Batman is brooding or something like that. But in this case, it feels very real that struggle to have a relationship with a father who's long gone, and that's your own personal experience, right?
Yeah.
So you're aware of drawing on that?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, it definitely, you know, my dad's been gone 30 years. He was, you know, he was alive for first 23 of my life, and then, you know, so his 30th anniversary just literally Friday, and he's buried and feathered at the foot of Fleadh. So I very much want to go back and see that, but no, the idea that, you know, it's the absence of the father that I think, it's not, you know, your dad went off on a business junket and got blown up by terrorists. That's a different kind of hurt. But the father who's almost a ghost now because they've been gone for so long, and you've grown up without them, their absence becomes just as important as their presence ever was in your life, and the silence of not having them. So I feel like that was more Tony's thing, is I grew up in the shadow of a great man, but do I deserve his legacy? What would his legacy be? Would it have changed? And he's left to grapple with all these thoughts about what his father, you know, would have wanted, and it's now on his responsibility. But I do like the idea that his father's been gone a long time, because when someone's a ghost, it's a different relationship, because then you mythologize them, but you also you know, maybe you criticize them more harshly, but oftentimes you totally mythologize what they were, and it's a complicated thing because there's no discussion really, other than with other people who knew someone. So I really like that he brought, I think that's the scene where you finally see the, you know, that this guy did worship his father. He idolized him, and he doesn't know whether he's doing the right thing right now, because this is not just his own legacy, it's his father's legacy that he's messing with. And again, like, you know, the visual medium of it, to sit on the floor, that communicates the vulnerability that we couldn't get through in the words, saying, I'm vulnerable. I feel, I've never been so scared in my life. You could have had terrible words like thrown at that emotion, but to make it physical, like your heart gets it, and the words are unnecessary. That's when movies do something that no other medium can do. Once in a while, they really, you know, good directors know, like the visual unspoken stuff is just as powerful, and every now and then it all meshes together, the spoken word and the silent film of it all, you know, that really do. Hitchcock always said, consider it a silent film before you add the dialogue, and it's brutally hard, but it's really a great exercise to think, what if I had to tell the story in pictures with no snappy dialogue?
No, it is like, and I mean, it's a, you know, it's a discipline to which I try to submit myself, and I encourage writers and go like, just give me a draft where you've got like one line of dialogue per page, you know, no more, like, or you can have 3 on this page, but then none for the next couple of pages. And it's a difficult thing to do, but as you say, that bypasses the brain again when the story is being told through images. I'm getting a note that we have to wrap up, but I really want to maybe play us out on the last scene, where I called this clip reality versus hyper reality, in that we're always in hyper reality when we're in a Marvel film, but you, in this version, you and Jon Favreau and everybody else on the creative team, there's this collision where it's almost real news footage, and I just thought it was a really amazing thing to do in a film like this. But before we do play that last clip, I'll say thank you very much, Mark. It was such a pleasure talking to you, and I really, really hope when you come to Ireland that like we can do something in person and lots of writers can
Definitely.
sit at your feet. It's so generous of you. What was your father's name, Mark?
John Morgan Fergus.
Okay, so we'll dedicate this to him, and
Absolutely.
to his memory on his 30th anniversary. I don't know anything else about him, but he brought up a great man and a great writer. So, okay, thank you very much, Mark
Thank
Fergus.
you.
We
Appreciate
will
it.
play out on this last scene from Iron Man.